WNST, Tass in Baltimore, and only a long night if you were wearing black and gold. And it was actually a shorter night. The game ended a little earlier than we're used to burning the midnight oil. Kevin Gorman has covered all things Steelers and Yins and That up in Pittsburgh for 2 decades at the Tribune Review. He's also 93.7, The Fan, host on the weekends, and the Trib Total Media Life. You can follow him at @KGorman_Trib in Pittsburgh. Dude, I want to call you Steelers and 412 and Penguins and Pirates, and I look up and it's all Penn State on your Twitter, man. I mean, you guys have had a pretty active little weekend up there with Yins and That in the media, haven't you?
Yeah, I got a chance to go up and see the Penn State-Ohio State game on Saturday night, and then Steelers-Ravens Sunday, so no complaints on my end.
Well, complaints if you're rooting for the home team, I guess. But by the way, before I even get into the Steelers thing, that Penn State thing's gotten crazy, right? I mean, I've only been to one Penn State game. It was 20 years ago. I went to a Penn State-Michigan game. Penn State got annihilated. It was the Greasy Woodson year, but I haven't been back since. I dated girls that were Penn State girls back in my time, and I haven't been for the vibe. Boy, Saturday night was like my wife sat up in bed Saturday and said, "Man, it's 3 hours away. You've never taken me there. Look at how awesome that is." And, half of my friends are up there as well. That was a hell of an environment. Not the ending you wanted, but it made me want to go to a Penn State game, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and I was a student there and covered the 94 team that won the Big Ten championship, won the Rose Bowl, went undefeated. Joe Paterno's last undefeated team.
Kajana Carter team, right? That was right?
Yeah, Kajana Carter, Kerry Collins, Cal Brady were the stars of that team. 3 top 10 draft picks, but they didn't have that atmosphere back then. Obviously, the stadium has expanded now to the point where they had almost 111,000 people at the stadium, almost everybody wearing white. You could see the red shirts dotted throughout the crowd.
Is there still traffic leaving? I often wonder, one of the reasons I don't go, swear to God, because I know people, I could probably get a parking pass and what. How the hell do you leave? I mean, that would be my issue. I'd spend the whole weekend up there, right?
Yeah, and the crazy thing is I'm typically the last guy out of the press box, so I've never dealt with traffic as a reporter. And in this case, I just went to watch the game, and so we left as soon as they got stopped on 4th down and didn't hit any traffic whatsoever. So I can only imagine the nightmare that it would have been for angry Penn State fans after that game and then to be stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic trying to get out of that parking lot or, all those parking lots. But I didn't encounter any. So, that was the nice part for me, was just a chance to go up there and see Penn State play in person, to see a top 10 game. I think it was the first time they've had 2 top 10 teams play at Beaver Stadium since 1999 when Penn State had LeVar Arrington and Courtney Brown.
He is Kevin Gorman. He covers all things Steelers. We'll get off this Penn State thing. We'll have our hands full. We're Maryland people around. We got Michigan. We got to go to the Big House this weekend, and we're playing out in Cleveland on the Ravens side, but that was not your dad's Ravens team on Sunday night, and it certainly does not look like the best face of the Steelers. I mean, if you would have told me a year ago they'd be playing without Ryan Shazier and without Le'Veon Bell, I'd say they probably wouldn't be very good, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think the Steelers fans, but even more importantly, the Steelers players, believed that they could overcome that and felt like that they would be as good, maybe not better, but as good as they were, that they could just plug in guys like John Bostic and James Conner and not skip a beat because of everybody they had back. And I think that's the harsh reality that's setting in right now is Steelers fans are saying this team just isn't very good. And Steelers players aren't willing to admit that. But the problem is, I think that's the biggest part of the problem, is they're not admitting where they're not good. I think this team's better than the fans believe it is, but I don't think it's as good as the players believe it is. And I think that's a really troubling thing. And when you start to see some of the patterns that have developed through the first 4 weeks of the season, the Steelers aren't fixing their problems. And I think the biggest problem is that they're not identifying that they're not as good as they think they are.
Well, and you're not as good as you think you are when Le'Veon Bell's not in there. And this thing has not played out in the way that anyone that's ever covered the history of the National Football League. I mean, I was kidding with Clark Judge earlier about Emmitt Smith and, holdouts and whatnot, but I don't think anybody in the Pittsburgh media, anybody around Le'Veon Bell, clearly not the offensive lineman, believed that he just wasn't going to show up this year.
No, I think that I don't think anybody. Let's put it this way, Nestor. I think they underestimated the threat that Le'Veon Bell has made. One, to hold out some point this season, and two, to possibly retire. There have been questions about Le'Veon Bell that when he shows up, he's ready to play, and he gives it everything he has, and he's an absolute workhorse when healthy. But there have been questions that his unwillingness to sign a long-term contract 2 years in a row, and his unwillingness to show up for any mini camps, training camp, any preseason games, that there were some people that have questioned his love and passion for football and whether he wants to endure this. This is a guy who has made some money, and he's forfeiting almost $900,000 a week, and that brings in the question as well. But
yeah, do you want to play, or do you not want to play? But the Earl Thomas thing over the week, I mean, when guys rip their knees up, there's something to be said, but he wasn't going to get much more than $14.5 million this year anyway. Nobody's giving him a $25 million bonus.
Negotiations going on. He had a franchise tag that he has to sign, and that's what he has to play for, and it pays him pretty well. I think the problem with Le'Veon Bell was that he really overestimated his value in the sense that he wants to be paid not only like a number one running back, but like a number two wide receiver. And though he had like 85 catches, he's only averaging about 7.7 yards per catch. So he doesn't bring number two wide receiver statistics. I think he's inflating the idea that a lot of the catches that he's making out of the backfield are essentially run plays, and that he's getting, better than average run yardage, but lower than average passing receiving totals.
He is Kevin Gorman. He covers all things Steelers for the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. He's also at Trib Sports on Twitter and @KGorman_Trib. That's TRIB with Yins and At in the Berg. How about the Ravens on Sunday? I mean, we'll talk about Ben and we'll talk about neutralizing the team and the loss of Shazier, but this is a better version of the Ravens than we've seen in recent years. It's certainly a better version of Flacco.
It really is, and I think the thing that I was most impressed with was not Joe Flacco, because I've been impressed with him, and I've seen him since his days when he was at Pitt as an undergrad and fighting on the depth chart, that we all knew what kind of an arm he had, and the only thing that really surprised us was the ability to be the field general. We just hadn't seen that yet. But Joe Flacco is obviously proven himself. I think they've surrounded him with better players, and I thought you saw him take advantage of his playmakers. It tells you a lot when John Brown's got more yardage than Antonio Brown, and almost twice as much yardage. And I thought he did a very good job of moving the team downfield and putting them in field goal position, because that's almost an automatic nowadays with Justin Tucker.
Well, you see Suggs coming in there and Roethlisberger, and we talk about this rivalry. We talked a lot about this last week, that Ray Lewis and Jerome Bettis and Hines Ward and Roethlisberger, it feels like those guys played in every game from the beginning of time, right? And now it's Suggs and Roethlisberger, but there are new sort of villains coming into this thing as well. Certainly on the Ravens side with C.J. Mosley getting back on the field the other night. The Ravens' defense in the second half has been as good as I've ever seen it. We've seen some pretty good defense played around here.
Yeah, and then combine that with the Steelers' offense in the second half is about as bad as we've seen them. They've been shut out the past 2 weeks, and they've been outscored in this second half, including in overtime. They've been outscored in 16 of 17 quarters this season. So you put those two together, the Ravens essentially just had to keep the Steelers, from putting points on the board and rely on the field goals, and they did just that. Not only did they not let them score, I don't think they let them cross the 50, and I think they only had 4 first downs, or three or four first downs the entire second half. They pretty much completely shut out the Steelers in every way imaginable.
Well, and I guess for the Steelers in moving on at this point, I'm not ready to throw the dirt onto the casket. I've done that too often. But I am wondering where the signs of life are going to come for the Steelers and when they're going to break out. Obviously, offensively, if they could just run the ball a little bit. I thought the Ravens would have a tougher time with Smith-Schuster. I thought they would have a tougher time with Antonio Brown. But Ben was eating in the middle of the defense underneath on the linebackers, and the Ravens missed some tackles early in the game.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, as you mentioned, they missed Le'Veon Bell because I think some of the passes that he was, more of a receiver when he split out. I mean, he wasn't just a running back out there like Connor is. He was a guy who has size, and he had the ability to get the yards after the catch and turn some of those short gains. I think some of them could have become first downs with Le'Veon Bell, who had a tendency to fall forward and pick up an extra couple of yards at 6'2". But the thing is, they're not getting Antonio Brown involved early enough or often enough. He's being targeted, but they're throwing into coverage. You're seeing signs that when Ben Roethlisberger is in the twilight of his career, and I think the Steelers are relying very much to almost too heavily on Ben to win them games. And what we're seeing is signs of inconsistency. We're seeing a guy that that when he is on, is still as good as anybody in the league, but he's not on often enough, and that's the pressure sometimes gets to him, and sometimes it's just a matter of, they're not getting that separation with Brown and Smith-Schuster. When those guys get the ball in their hands, they can be game breakers. But this Steelers team right now is lacking some leadership. But I will say this, 2 years ago, the Steelers lost 4 consecutive games. They talked about how terrible they were on defense. Then they won 7 in a row to make the playoffs, won 2 playoff games, and lost in the AFC Championship. Last year, they started the season 2-2, then won 11 of their last 12, made it to the playoffs. So, this is a team that knows how to win. And right now, I think they're going to have to do kind of like a self-check, check themselves in the mirror, and kind of everybody starts showing some signs of accountability. But right now, they need some signs of leadership from starting with Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown. Those two need to get on the same page, because unless they are, this team just isn't very good.
Kevin Gorman joining us here from Pittsburgh with Yins and At. You can follow him at @KGorman_Trib and at Trib Sports and the Tribune Review, where they're getting ready for the Caps to visit the Penguins later on this week. The Ravens are off to Cleveland, and we will be at Buffalo Wild Wings on Wednesday night swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero and leukemia and lymphoma and blood cancer patients. We'll be doing that with wide receiver Willie Snead, who caught a couple of balls, as well as Nick Boyle, who we're going to have a little soft side chat about animals, his love of dogs, my love of our cat as well on Wednesday night. Come on out, meet the players, get an autograph, get a picture, eat some wings, watch the Yankees get eliminated, watch the Caps hoist the banner down in D.C. It's going to be a big night. It's Wednesday night. It's at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air. We'll be there at 7:30 with Willie Snead as well as Nick Boyle. We hope to see your face in the place. All of our WNST programming brought to you by the Lee Tessier team, Baltimore's premier realty team, and the people I trust with my real estate transactions, with over 50 years of helping other real estate buyers and sellers just like you and me, locating the finest properties and negotiating the best deals. That's what they do. They take the work out of it. They'll help you sell your home. They'll give you the good advice, and certainly they've given me good advice as well. LeeTessier.com, the way to find them. Also, Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, the tasty coffee, the best fried chicken in the land. And don't forget the Western fries. Use that app when you're pumping your gas at the Royal Farms pump, and you'll get your Western fries and your fried chicken free when you collect your rewards. Kevin Gorman is our guest. He is up in Pittsburgh. Last thing for you, Kev, especially on the Steelers. Tomlin's got his hands full, right, at this point. And I don't know that there's never been choppy water there. To your point, they haven't played their best football in September a lot of these years, much like the New England Patriots have not played their best football in September. But you look up right around Thanksgiving, and there's a 7-5 or an 8-5 or something like that going on. I don't know that the Steelers are going to get there, and I look at their schedule and wonder where it's all coming from. But this might be the choppiest water Mike Tomlin has found himself in. Now, of course, it helps when you won 13 games last year, but they haven't been to a Super Bowl in a number of years either.
No, and the thing that fans are starting to focus on is saying, well, he's won 13 games. He's had all these winning seasons. I think 2013 was their last season where they didn't have double-digit wins. But people are saying this is not, when Mike Tomlin talks about the standard is the standard is winning the Super Bowl. And this is not a team that celebrates the regular season. The players may celebrate winning the AFC North, and going 6-0 last year certainly helped their cause to a 13-win season, as did facing a bunch of teams that didn't have their starting quarterbacks, like Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson. Even Sam Bradford was out when they played the Vikings. Some of the teams that started rookies early, or started players and were replaced by rookies later. That has been the issue, is that Mike Tomlin doesn't have the postseason success to show for it in recent years. And there has been a growing sentiment that the Steelers have wasted a big part of Ben Roethlisberger's prime. They've said they have a Hall of Fame franchise quarterback, and you have a team that's not winning the postseason games. To me, that's on Ben Roethlisberger as much as it is on Mike Tomlin. But Ben Roethlisberger is not going to be the guy that takes the fall for that. Mike Tomlin will be if the Steelers fall short of the expectations. And as you know, the expectations are not just to make the playoffs, but to get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl championship. And the Steelers haven't done that since 2008. It's been a decade since they've won the Super Bowl. And so, it's the grace period has worn off to celebrate winning a Super Bowl, to celebrate even getting there a couple years later and losing to the Packers. But, not only is Mike Tomlin under pressure, he's under pressure himself as the head coach, but also because these are his hand-picked coordinators. Keith Butler and Randy Fichtner are two guys that came with Tomlin, and they've ascended into those roles. And neither one of their, their sides are performing up to the standard. And I think that missing Le'Veon Bell and missing Ryan Shazier, I think more importantly, I don't know that there's been losing a player had a more devastating impact on the Steelers since perhaps they lost, Jack Lambert and Terry Bradshaw in the early 80s, as to the reversing the team's fortunes very quickly, because Ryan Shazier was the guy that his ability was unique, and his ability to play fast, to make tackles sideline to sideline, and to drop into coverage and make interceptions. He had a unique ability that allowed that defense some flexibility and a chance to be spectacular. And right now, you can see in the middle of that defense, that's the soft spot on the Steelers, and that's where every team is attacking, including the Ravens on Sunday night.
Well, as I said, no Bell, no Shazier. You got a lot of splaining to do and a lot of picking up to do, and there's a reason these guys are $10, $15, $20 million ball players. When they're not in there is no next man up. That's hyperbole. That's not real.
Yeah, here's the problem. The Steelers have, I think they have something like 8 or 9 guys that are either first or second round draft picks on that defense. It's not like there's a lack of talent. The problem is there's a lack of productivity from that talent. You're not seeing the sack totals that you saw last year from guys like Cam Hayward and T.J. Watt. You're not seeing the production the Steelers expected and what they're paying for Stephon Tuitt and Bud Dupree. You're not seeing Artie Burns has yet to live up to the expectation of a first-round pick, as has Sean Davis as a second-round pick, and Terrell Edmonds is still a rookie, and he's out there. Morgan Burnett has proven right now, because of injuries, to be a bad free agent signing. And when you had serious holes on your defense, to sign John Bostic and Morgan Burnett and think that would be the Band-Aid that could cover for Ryan Shazier just proved to be folly.
Well, and bad drafts, we know all about that with Matt Elam and Brashad Perryman. It's one of the reasons we haven't made the playoffs around here. When you lose players and you don't replace them and you have bad draft picks and Artie Burns who can't get on the field, you're going to lose a lot of football games because of that unless you're really, really deft and deep in your draft.
Yeah, here's the thing. The Steelers didn't attempt to find a replacement for Ryan Shazier in the draft, which just had everybody kind of mind-boggled in that sense. They didn't go after an inside linebacker. They didn't try to trade up and get somebody or to make a trade. I mean, right now, the thing that looks really bad for the Steelers is that they just took for granted that Le'Veon Bell would show up the way that he did last year. And when they could have possibly made some type of a move and traded Le'Veon Bell and got something in return. Now, if the Steelers are actually going to entertain offers for Le'Veon Bell, you know that they're going to get shortchanged, given that he's playing on the franchise tag. You don't know when he's going to show up. If this is a guy who wants to preserve his body, that he can't sign a long-term deal until 2019. So there's no guarantees, on either side, that the team that trades for him may not be able to sign him long-term. And Le'Veon Bell may try, he may even have a handshake, wink, wink, nod, nod agreement and then get injured and that falls apart. So I don't see the Steelers getting the value out of Le'Veon Bell maybe the way they could have, had they not come to that agreement and just said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have you go look for a team. I think the Steelers just thought that they could maximize this franchise tender, and the Bell was at their mercy. And right now we're seeing a Steelers team that's at his.
Yeah, that's a turning of the tables. And that's not, the Rooneys aren't reaching to him and giving him more money to come in now. Feels to me like they're just pissed, right? They're just stay out.
The worst part is they can't. There's nothing they can do. They're bound by league rules to just pay him this franchise tender. It's not like they can sweeten the pot for him. They've offered him long-term deals. I think where the Rooneys really, made a mistake was that they thought that Le'Veon Bell would take the offer that they put on the table. That was, when you look at the numbers of it, the offer appeared to be pretty prominent. But when you look at the guaranteed money, and that's the difference, I think they underestimated that the Rams would go out and give Todd Gurley something like $45 million guaranteed. And when Le'Veon Bell saw that, it changed his entire perspective. It changed his entire game plan, because he went from a guy that probably would have reported a week before the season to one who all of a sudden saw Todd Gurley get paid, saw Khalil Mack get paid, and Aaron Donald get paid, and said, you know what, it's my turn. And I don't know if that's a good move by him or not, because, the Steelers had Mike Merriweather hold out for a whole season back in the 80s, and he went from a Pro Bowl linebacker to kind of an afterthought. Sometimes sitting out a season can be really counterproductive for a player. But my thing with Le'Veon Bell is that here was a guy who had an offensive line that had 3 Pro Bowl picks. You had a Pro Bowl quarterback, you had a all-pro wide receiver outside you. You know, this was an offense that was custom built for Le'Veon Bell to be successful. He's piled up big numbers, both rushing and receiving, and he had a chance to play on a playoff team and have a chance to win a Super Bowl. And even if he had come in and played one final season for the Steelers, taken the franchise tag tender offer, and performed the way that Le'Veon Bell has performed when healthy, I don't think there'd been the grudge against him from Pittsburghers who would have said, hey, this guy did everything he wanted. You know, if the Steelers won a Super Bowl and he rode off into the sunset and would sign a free agent deal elsewhere, I think people would wish him the best. Right now, he's going to bear the brunt of the Steelers fans' disappointment and anger. And you know, this team's going to suffer for it because they built themselves around having Le'Veon Bell instead of having to play the first 4 weeks without him. I could say this, though. If Le'Veon Bell decided to show up on, you know, today or tomorrow and come to the rescue, I think this team would welcome him with open arms because you saw how ineffective their rushing attack is, and even more importantly, how little they put into making it effective. This is a team that has kind of abandoned the running game, and they've done it whether they were winning or losing.
Well, the whole thing's got level set in the division, right? I mean, with the balance of power where the Bengals and the Ravens appear to be pretty good, the Browns appear to be better, and we're not sure what to make of the Steelers, but they just got their noses bloody on Sunday night by their division rival in the slobber knocker game of the year. The answering of that bell comes this week for the Ravens in Cleveland, then in Nashville the week after, and I know the Steelers have a tough game against the Falcons as well.
Yeah, and you know, the thing about it isn't the Steelers didn't just lose to their rival. They lost to their rival at home, and they lost to their rival in a game they really needed to win for division reasons, as you mentioned. The Steelers are winless in the AFC North. They're winless at Heinz Field. They're winless in the AFC. This is a team, and people are ridiculing me for saying this, this is a team, if they want to make the playoffs, and I'm getting the reaction, I'm getting the Jim Moore reaction, playoffs. But this is a team that was Super Bowl or bust coming in, and now you're looking at their best route to making the playoffs would have been to win the division. And right now they're just they're basically in the same boat as the Cleveland Browns. And to be a team that won 13 games last year and be after 4 games a quarter way through the season to be in the same boat as a team that went 0-16, that's a really bad, troubling sign, and to me, a troubling pattern. And if the Steelers don't recognize it and don't fix it soon, this is going to be a season that is going to be considered an epic fail.
We've waited all of our lives for the Steelers to stink, Kev. So they stink this year. With all due respect to my pal Mike Tomlin, you know, at least you got a couple of Stanley Cups and hockey starts this week, so that's what we could say, right?
Yeah, you know, then they have to open up against the Stanley Cup champions, the team that eliminated them from the playoffs. So that makes this for a real interesting week. And, you know, I look at this week, and the Pirates just ended the season with 82 wins. Who would have thought we would have been talking at this point, entering October, that the Pirates ended their season with a more positive vibe than the Steelers started their season, that the Penguins were going to have to open their season against the Stanley Cup champion Washington Capitals, and that Pitt football would be in a desperation game on Saturday against Syracuse, knowing that after losing to North Carolina, the worst team in the ACC, that every game now in conference play is a must-win. This is a weird fall for Pittsburghers. The Pirates have been the whipping boy for so many years, and right now they're the only feel-good story in town, unless the Penguins, you know, would start the season by beating the Caps.
Kev, we don't play Major League Baseball in Baltimore. I don't know if you're aware of that or not.
We said that for 20 years here in Pittsburgh, and then they finally reversed the fortunes, and that's where you saw Andrew McCutchen was the catalyst of that whole thing, turning it around from 20 consecutive losing seasons to 3 consecutive playoff appearances, and then the Pirates go and trade him. It may not have been a bad baseball move, especially in hindsight, but you know that's where you saw the fans get their hearts ripped out. Was that was the one guy they clung to, and I can sympathize with Baltimore fans, especially with losing Manny Machado. That was a guy that we've sit here and think about, that Manny Machado was on the board, and the Pirates chose Jamison Tyone, who went through his share of maladies. You know, he had Tommy John surgery. He got hit in the back of the head with a baseball. He had testicular cancer, surgery for that last season. So he's finally coming into his own. But at that point, Manny Machado is also won his share of Gold Gloves and had All-Star appearances. And so, you know, there's a lot of people that lament, and myself included, that lament that the Pirates didn't draft Manny Machado. So we can only sympathize with the and empathize with what the Baltimore baseball fans are going through.
Well, you wouldn't have given him $250 million either.
Bad baseball teams.
You would have been dealing him off to the Dodgers this summer, too. And obviously, we've let Adam Jones go now, so we have that McCutchen sort of feeling here. And, we lost 115 games, so we'll see what the offseason holds. Hey, man, look forward to seeing you guys in a couple of weeks. Really appreciate you making some time and coming on, Kev. It was great having you on as a guest.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Kevin Gorman's up in Pittsburgh. He covers all things Pittsburgh sports for the Trib Sports folks and Tribune Review, as well as at @KGorman_Trib and at 93.7 The Fan, where he does some weekend radio. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere you happen to be. Our morning newspaper delivers digitally at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's brought to you by Planet Fitness at PlanetFitness.com, where it's always $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. They're judgment-free. They got the lunk alarm, and it's right around the corner. Bad weather's coming inside. TVs, treadmill, weights, all that you need at Planet Fitness. Also brought to you by Laurel Park and our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club. The Maryland Million runs on October the 20th. We hope to see you down there. If you haven't been to Laurel lately, get down there and check it out. It's remodeled. It's beautiful. It's Vegas-like. Laurel Park racing this weekend and the Maryland Million around the corner. Don't forget, Wednesday night, we're going to be in Bel Air at Buffalo Wild Wings at the festival, swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry and for There Goes My Hero. Come on out, give a spit, save a life, and meet Ravens wide receiver Willie Snead. We'll be chatting with him. And Nick Boyle, tight end from Delaware. A little Joe Flacco connection there as well in Bel Air. It's Wednesday night. Nick Boyle and Willie Snead swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry. The show starts at 7:30. We're going to hate on the Yankees. We're going to raise the roof with the Caps banner on Wednesday night. Big night of baseball, hockey, and football conversation and some life-saving that we're doing up there in Harford County. All of it brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender. Carl Delmont and our friends at Freedmont Mortgage sponsor all of our swabbings. They'll be out with us on Wednesday night in Bel Air as well. Whether you're buying, selling, or thinking about it, there's a world of education at Freedmont.com where they hold your hand and get you ready to buy or sell. Make the biggest decision in your life. Buying or selling a home, Fremont Mortgage. You got me anytime, anywhere. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We go wherever you go. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.